So, we got the numbers back for the Demon Slayer movie, and so far, things are looking pretty crazy, bro. At least as far as sales, records, dollars, as far as things of that nature are concerned, Demon Slayer, for a lack of a better term, is killing it, bro. It's going absolutely zany out there. For starters, let's talk about the domestic box office, alright? Let's talk about how things are looking here in the US, where a good majority of my viewers are from. At the time of me writing the script for this video, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, the movie Infinity Castle, which is the very long-winded full name of the movie, is currently sitting at the number 16 spot on the domestic box office chart, meaning that it is the 16th highest selling movie here in the US this year, or year to date at least. It realistically will get knocked down to like the top 20, top 25 by the end of the year because of like, I don't know, Zootopia or some shit. Anywho, if you thought this movie's domestic performance was impressive, then you'll probably find its global performance to be even more impressive, seeing as though it currently sits at the number 9 spot on the global charts. Honestly, I could sit here all day talking about the numbers, right? It did like 70 M's the first weekend here in the US, which is the biggest anime debut in US history. It opened up with like 33 M's on just the singular Friday that it dropped alone. It already is the second highest grossing Japanese film of all time, sitting second only to its predecessor, the Mugen Train movie. And again, keep in mind, all of these numbers and records and, you know, all that, the accolades and whatever, they're all for a part 1 of a 3-part trilogy, right? Like, this movie on its own isn't even really a self-contained story. And so, like, honestly, I just feel like that makes this turn out even more impressive, because there's nothing inherent about this movie that would really draw new fans in. There's nothing conclusive about this movie that makes it feel like the end of an era. There's not really that FOMO effect for people who aren't already fans of the series. This movie is basically pulling these numbers off of like fan power alone. And I mean, again, I could keep going on and on about the numbers and whatnot, but yeah, suffice to say, Demon Slayer is out here feeding the streets right now. And speaking of feeding things, allow me to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Alright, so check it. Lately, I've been trying to be more consistent at the gym. Alright, I got the Apple Watch on so you know it's real, bruh. But one thing that I've realized, and anyone who's ever tried to improve their health can probably attest to this, if your food isn't in check, you're not going to see the type of progress that you want to see, and that's simply the straight up truth of the matter. Fortunately for me, Factor has made managing my food so much less of a hassle. It's literally 2 minutes in the microwave and done, and it's not just quick, it's calorie conscious at only 350 to 550 calories per meal, and it's fresh, never frozen meals that actually have like that home cooked taste. Like, hold on, bro, look at this, bro. I mean, I took it out the box and put it on a plate just so it looked, you know, but got my little chicken meal here, if it would just get into focus. There we go. Come on, bro. Got my little broccoli. But yeah, the food that Factor provides is actually good. Like, I had this steak that they had the other day, this little filet mignon. Bro, I had never tasted a tender steak from out the microwave before. How do you even do that? Just recently, Factor has leveled their game up. They've actually doubled their menu, which now has 80 plus rotating weekly meals with double the seafood and double the high protein options, which for me, you know, those are my favorite type of meals. They even added a swap feature, so if you want chicken instead of pork or some other dietary restriction, you can easily swap that out free of charge. Alright, so look, here's the deal. If you head over to factor75.com or click the link below and use my code TeddySlumpFB50, you can get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. Again, that's TeddySlumpFB50 at factor75.com for 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. Thanks again to Factor for sponsoring this video and providing me with these free dinners for the past week or so. And now, back to the video. Now, if you're anything like me, and based on the fact that you clicked this video, I'm gonna assume that we at least have some things in common. Actually, you should subscribe because of that, by the way. Yeah, go ahead and do that. But if you're anything like me, the performance of the Demon Slayer movie, the numbers, the dollars, the records, it's really not that much of a surprise, right? Like, we all kind of expected this to happen the moment we heard about the rest of the series being adapted into a 3-part movie trilogy. For starters, Demon Slayer is the biggest anime to come out of the past decade, and quick side note before we go any further. Around this time last year, I made that same statement in passing, a statement about Demon Slayer being the biggest anime of the past decade, and I had a good few people in my comments role-playing like I was on hard drugs for having said that. And so I want to address that statement real quick because honestly, I think it's pretty cut and dry facts, but if we're going off manga sales, which is damn near the only objective public data that we get that we can use to kind of gauge how big a series is, Demon Slayer simply blows the rest of this past decade out of the water by at least 2.5 times. And like, I'm almost certain that prime 2020 Demon Slayer had the biggest year sales wise of any manga to ever drop ever. And like, true, it's just 1 year and you know, it had the COVID boost inflating the numbers and whatever, but when you take into account the fact that One Piece's biggest sales year, Naruto's biggest sales year, and Bleach's biggest sales year all combined still don't equate to Demon Slayer's biggest sales year, I'm not going to say that Demon Slayer is bigger than the big three, though I do think that it's probably bigger than Bleach and will probably go on to maybe reach like a Naruto-ish level of popularity as the years go on. But I will say that I am damn sure that nothing from the past decade is even on that echelon yet. And like, I know manga sales aren't everything, it's a nuanced conversation, not many countries buy manga and so it doesn't really represent the globe, and so I'm down to hear any counterpoints if y'all have them in the comments. But anywho, back to the topic at hand. After the success of the first Demon Slayer movie, the success of the manga, the success of seasons 2 and 3 of the anime, the relative success of the 2 games, and you know, so on and so forth with all its prior accolades, it really should have been no surprise that this new movie would go monkey mode at the box office. I mean, hey, at least it was no surprise for me that this movie went monkey mode at the box office, but oddly enough, from what I can tell, it seems that Hollywood is rather surprised that this movie performed as well as it did. As I started reading through the articles coming from our media over here in the US, cause you know, I'm unk now, pushing 65 and shit. Every morning I'll wake up and read a big ass newspaper with a cup of joe and shit. But as I was going through these articles, I saw quite a few that were framing the Infinity Castle movie's performance as like a surprise. And I mean, simply put, the way these articles are talking about this movie and its success just doesn't make sense to me. I want to focus on this one article that came out from AP, aka the Associated Press, for all you niggas out there that don't read. Now, generally speaking, you wouldn't go to the Associated Press for anime type news, and so yeah, right off rip, I was already kind of surprised to see that they had dropped an article on this movie in the first place. The Associated Press, again, for all you non-reading niggas, is a generally well-respected source within like mainstream political news circles, at least here in the US. They're one of the more prominent groups when it comes to like political polling as well. And so even though they're not super relevant when it comes to like anime, pop culture, nerd culture, you know, that sort of space, I want to kind of focus on this article because I think they reflect a more quote unquote mainstream and maybe a more dated perspective than like a Polygon or a Kotaku would. And I think this dated, non-chronically online employed perspective is probably more in line with what's going on in Hollywood boardrooms right now. And so yeah, as I'm reading this article, it almost immediately kicks off with this sort of framing that paints Demon Slayer as like an underdog, right? It compares the Demon Slayer movie to the new Conjuring movie that just dropped around the same time, and it's basically like, yeah, this Japanese anime film just outsold the fucking Conjuring. And then it goes on to claim that Demon Slayer quote unquote shattered expectations, and it's like, all right, hold on now. Let's keep it a full stack right now. First of all, I don't know why The Conjuring was brought up in the first place. If I'm being honest, like, yes, Demon Slayer did knock The Conjuring out of its #1 spot, but it's like, at the same time, did y'all genuinely not expect Demon Slayer to be able to top The Conjuring after it had already been out for a week? Granted, The Conjuring is a big franchise, kinda, at least across its like 17 different horror movie titles. I'll say it's pretty big here in America, but again, I feel like you need to look no further than the last Demon Slayer movie, the biggest global movie of 2020, by the way, to come to the conclusion that week 2 Conjuring didn't really stand a chance to Demon Slayer, bro. I mean, it's like you're putting a literal demon movie up against the movie titled Demon Slayer. Like, come on, bro, we eat those. It's prophecy. We eat those like fact. And also, in case you're wondering, although The Conjuring did still technically sell more than Demon Slayer here in the US, again, them global charts are always going to reveal the frauds among us, bro. And if you look at the global charts and where they stand right now, there is a healthy gap between the Infinity Castle and what's the Conjuring shit called? The Last Rites. And so, yeah, make what you will of that. Anywho, first couple paragraphs, we're already building up Demon Slayer's success as like this kind of niche hit that just so happened to punch over its weight, right? Like ignoring the fact that we have the Mugen Train success as proof of concept, ignoring the fact that we have at least 5 years now of relatively successful shonen anime movie theater runs, whether it was JJK Zero, One Piece Film Red, what have you. I mean, for an industry that doesn't really rely on movies, that up until recently really just use movies as like an extra treat, an extra little cash grab that they would sprinkle on top, the movies coming out of the anime industry have been doing very, very well. And you'd think that the people who analyze this shit for a living would, at the very least, at the very bare minimum, have these anime movies on their radar. But again, apparently they don't. The article goes on to quote a guy named Paul 𝙏𝙖𝙡𝙠. Okay, now Mr. 𝙏𝙖𝙡 is apparently a senior analyst at a company called ComScore, and ComScore essentially works with businesses and publishers and whoever to get audience insights for marketing and whatnot. Now, Paul, if you look him up, just do a basic Google search of his name, he seems to be a pretty big deal around these entertainment streets. The bio page that he has up on ComScore's website basically explains that he's like a premier expert when it comes to like film and TV audiences and like analyzing that data. And credit where credit is due, all right? I gotta give Goatman Paul his props, all right? I've seen his name quoted in quite a few articles of this same vein when I looked him up, and so he seems to be a pretty well-respected authority when it comes to box office insights. And so with that said, I feel like knowing who this man is and the role that he plays within Hollywood or those sorts of circles really only makes this quote from him even more perplexing. Paul kind of once again doubles down on that framing that we got from earlier in the article. If anything, he kind of goes even harder in characterizing Infinity Castle as like a flash in the pan, unpredictable miracle, right? Saying that the movie, quote unquote, shows the unpredictability of the box office, and going on to call it an overperformance and saying kudos to you if you predicted that this movie would do well. And now at this point, I'm sitting here reading this like, all right, there's something going on here, man. There's something that Hollywood is just not tapped into that I really think they should be more cognizant of. Not just because I personally like anime, but also because it's starting to feel like a blatant, almost self-sabotaging disregard for the numbers that we all have in front of us. Now look, if this were just some random unk that just wasn't tapped in with the media that's resonating with the youth and the young adults of the world, then I would be like, okay, who cares, right? Unk is probably focused on, I don't know, maxing out his 401k and fucking taking his daughter to tennis practice. Why would he give a damn about what Japanese cartoon is shattering box office records? But to see a leader in the industry who, generally speaking, knows what he's talking about, frame this movie's success as like this sort of happy accident as opposed to a very calculated and intentional and strategic victory for the anime market, I don't know, man. It's like, how long is Hollywood going to keep doing this same song and dance with itself before it finally realizes that the masses yearn for more mature animated content? One thing that Japan seems to excel at, especially over the past decade or so, is not only creating media that connects with the world at large, but also constantly and consistently capturing that lightning in a bottle again and again and again through what's essentially a ruthless routine of trial and error. Now, personally, I think certain companies, namely Jump, could be a bit more forgiving toward their creatives when it comes to like treating them and their well-being with due respect. But on the other side of that fence, if I turn off my empathy and just think of things from a purely numbers perspective, devil's advocate, okay? There is an argument to be made that, look, bro, the numbers don't lie. Jump has essentially become a breeding ground, an incubator for like 3 to 5 mega hit series per decade at this point. Shit, they damn near have the process down to a science at this point, but their whole process from way back in the 70s all the way up until now essentially boils down to the principle of not being afraid to try new shit, not being afraid to make new stories, to make new characters, and even if only for a few months in some cases, put a genuine investment, a genuine monetary investment into these new stories that's on par with the stories that have already proven themselves. Now, this sort of success isn't something that I think is beyond Hollywood's reach by any means, right? I actually think like way back when Unk and them were born, 1900, Hollywood used to be pretty great at this. And I think that's why a lot of the old guards of the US media ecosystem are still insanely popular on a global scale. Think Marvel, DC, Star Wars, so on and so forth. I think as things stand right now, some of the slightly more tapped in, more forward-thinking companies, namely Netflix and Crunchyroll, are attempting to merge the two worlds, right? They're attempting to merge like the legacy US media ecosystem with the current global, largely online ecosystem that has a big splash of anime influence coursing through its veins. For instance, one thing I noticed about the marketing of this newest Demon Slayer movie that was pretty peculiar, pretty unique, at least here in the States. All right, I don't know what it was like, for all y'all, but at least where I was watching it, the rollout this time around was noticeably more Hollywood than what you'd usually expect from an anime movie rollout. Normally them motherfuckers just don't give a damn, right? They drop a few trailers, a few key visuals, put out like a tweet or something, put it on Crunchyroll homepage, and then bam, movie time. And they did all that this time around. But I think additionally this time around, they definitely tried to like play the Hollywood game a bit more than they usually do with all the like big name Hollywood red carpet fanfare and that type of shit. Like, I don't know what the previews were like at y'all screening, right? But for me, I remember just sitting there at the back of the theater right before the movie started and thinking to myself, why on God's green earth am I watching an interview about Channing Tatum and his daughter liking Black Clover? But then it's like, when I thought about it some more as I was working on this video, I realized that although that ad probably had minimal effect on me as someone who's been entrenched in this anime shit basically for life, realistically speaking, there's probably some 41-year-old mom out there named Erica who has a crush on Channing Tatum from like Magic Mike or some shit, and she finally folded to little Christopher Squiggles' pleas to see the Demon Slayer movie, despite Pastor Mike saying it was the devil's work or Chinese propaganda or whatever. But nah, jokes aside, I was not the target audience for that ad, but I can see and understand who the target audience probably was, and as menial as it probably felt to you and I, as what I'm assuming is chronically online anime fans, I wouldn't be surprised if it maybe made, the Erica Squiggles of the world a bit more open-minded to the idea of watching an anime/anime type movie. And as critical as I am of some of Crunchyroll's business practices, I do try to give them credit where credit is due when it comes to like trying to bridge that gap. Because look, I know a lot of you niggas don't want to see anime fold to Western sensibilities in like any degree, and that's a whole nother can of worms that I'm not even going to crack open right now, lest I get even more sidetracked than I already am. But as someone who just likes cool animated media, and as someone who wants to see more cool adult animated media from their home country of the US, I know that for Hollywood to even think about investing into something that even remotely smells like anime, apart from I guess Spider-Verse at this point, they're gonna want to see a tangible proof of concept first. And as things stand right now, that proof of concept is going to be movies like the Infinity Castle trilogy that show just how many dollars that style of content can command in theaters. So, anywho, back to the big question of this video. What can Hollywood learn from the success of Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, the Infinity Castle, the movie, Part 1 of 3, long ass title, like come on bro. For one, I think this movie and its success has got to be the final, ultimate, undeniable proof that there is a market for mature animated products within the United States of America, and not goofy sex joke mature like Sausage Party and whatnot. I'm talking about mature animated content that takes itself seriously like any other live action film might. I think if after this movie and its success and the numbers and everything supporting its existence, if it's still ignored after this, then at this point it's just willful ignorance and niggas just not doing their job. I also think that one of the big takeaways that Hollywood is going to see in this movie's success is the cost. I know that when discussing like TV anime and TV animation, we constantly talk about how expensive it is to produce good anime, and we make jokes about like the budget relative to the quality of different anime, so on and so forth. Oh, Ufotable put $20 million into Mitsuri's thighs and, you know, shit like that. But when it comes to blockbusters, we're dealing with a whole nother level of bread, bro. We're talking crazy level guap just to be able to step into the arena. Hundreds of millions just to get the movie made. And so if I'm a Hollywood exec and I look at a movie like Demon Slayer that costs a whole order of magnitude less to produce at like $20 million reportedly, suddenly the idea of putting down that investment, which is less than what you'd pay some individual A-list actors, doesn't seem like such a crazy investment anymore. It probably won't return like Demon Slayer if it's not already tied to a big name like Spider-Verse or like, I don't know, some animated Batman movie, like a huge already established franchise. Yeah, it won't return like that, but pulling profit on a $20 million production is a lot easier than pulling a profit on a $200 million production. And honestly, I feel like that's just simple math. Anyway, if you haven't seen this movie already, I highly recommend it. I'm going to assume you have if you click this video, but you know, let me know what you think in the comments, what you thought about the movie, what you think about what it means for the grander box office movie industry going forward, what it means for anime movies, what it means for animated movies, what it means for anime in general. And yeah, I'll see y'all next time. Peace.